Hey everybody, welcome to the Bold Podcast. We've got a really exciting guest. I've seen God move in his life in incredible ways, but more so in the recent years, God's been really working on him. He's got a testimony and a story that I know is going to bless you and help you. Today I got my friend Daniel Perez on the podcast. What's up, man? How are you?
Thanks for having me, man. I'm really excited to be here.
When's the last time that we hung out?
Oh man.
It's been years.
Yeah, it's been years.
I always see you like here and there, but
yeah, actually hung out. It's been a while.
It's been a long time, dude.
Long overdue.
We've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
Many years.
Yeah, I was a different person back then.
Yes, I think a lot of us were, very different back in the day when we were young. I remember we were in kids ministry together. We have pictures of like crowd surfing in the
Oh yeah, that's an awesome picture.
in the children's church. But what was that life like for you back in the day? I kind of want to get your perspective of those years because I think they're really important to the story that you're going to tell us today.
Yeah.
So we grew up in the church, and then you and your family went to go pastor a church in Bell Gardens. And what was your mindset like that as a young kid, being a pastor's kid, growing up in the church? How do you feel like that shaped you now?
So I probably have a different take on being a pastor's kid than most. I actually loved being a pastor's kid.
Really?
I love the attention. I love the privileges. I used to go into my church kitchen and steal all the snacks, and nobody could tell me anything. I had the passwords to a lot of the doors that not even some leaders had, and I loved that stuff. But I think growing up, it really helped my walk with God up until my teen years. But as a younger kid, I loved it. I loved that my dad would let all my friends come to my house, and every Thursday for youth night, all my friends from school were able to come and hang out at my house, and we'd all go to church together. It was really awesome. I got to make an impact on a lot of my friends back then.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a really cool thing up until my high school years. It began to become a burden, and probably because my own desire for the world started to increase. So the burden of being a pastor's kid began to increase as well, because my desires were split. I was no longer desiring the church world, and I was desiring more the world. And that indifference just kind of caused me to I wanted my actions to only affect me.
Right.
And at that point, I had to act a certain way and perform so that I didn't ruin my parents' reputation. And that was hard.
You were concerned about what they thought about you, people thought about you.
Yeah,
because I remember even seeing you like as a young guy, even like a young teenager, maybe 12, 13, 14, whatever.
Yeah.
And it was always like, man, Danny's so influential, he's making a difference. He's bringing people to church. And it was like, we kind of look back on those days and thought, man, the revival in your church really started because you started inviting your friends to church. But now you're saying as you grew up, there was this split. Like, man, I really want to do this, serve God, but I also really want what the world has to offer me.
Yeah.
But if you grew up in church, how did those desires come about? What was the temptation? Where did it start?
Yeah. Well, I think what kept me safe when I was younger is having good leaders. My good friend Marcel, shout out.
Marcel.
I think early on, he helped create a culture in our church of just having no hidden doors in our life. I remember early on we would have like these things called real talk, and we would all get together, like all the guys would get together in the room, and we'd confess our sins to each other. And it was really helpful because it just kind of helped, release the shame of we all deal with this kind of stuff. We all have these things that are kind of shameful, but we don't have to be ashamed in the church. But as people moved on to different phases in their life, I didn't always have that leadership.
Right.
And when that leadership wasn't present for me, the shame started to get heavier and heavier, and I didn't have an outlet. So I started to look for other things to help release all that built up tension in my life. So instead of going to the church, I would, go and tell my friends. And instead of hearing oh, this is how you should deal with this in the Lord, it was like, dude, you're way behind. We've done X, Y, and Z.
Wow.
You need to keep up. Growing up in high school, there's a lot of pressure to act a certain way. And I remember I'd be on the sports teams and, hearing about all these guys and they're having sex with so-and-so and doing this with so-and-so. And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, I've never kissed a girl before. I've never even held a girl's hand. Like, I need to get on it.
Yeah.
So there was real pressure from the world to be sinful. And I started to cave in and I started desiring and I started looking at myself like, man, I'm kind of weird. Like, I'm not normal. This is not normal for me to be pure. I need to go get my hands dirty.
Yeah.
And so I started like having this fantasy, and then that fantasy developed into like a porn addiction. I started watching porn like later on as I started to get into my later years of high school. And again, I didn't really have an outlet to like go and tell somebody about this because I'm a pastor's kid. I was scared that I was gonna get kicked off the worship team. I was playing the drums at the church, and I didn't want to get kicked off. I loved playing. I didn't want to have any repercussion from my sin, so I hid it, and it just made it worse. So that fantasy developed from porn to really wanting a physical relationship with a woman in a non-pure way.
Wow.
So,
Before all that, was there a moment, like, what was that first encounter with God like? Because my question oftentimes when I think about people that have gone through what you've gone through, I'm often thinking like, man, did they ever really encounter God, or was it always just church?
yeah.
So would you say that you encountered God as a young kid, or would you say that you just kind of grew up in the church culture?
No, I have no doubts that I encountered God in my early years. I mean, I have core memories experiencing the Holy Spirit. I remember being in a children's church with Pastor Diga or Pastor David, and being baptized in the Holy Spirit. And I remember those encounters being so real and so tangible for me. I had no doubts that God was real. And so I think that what happened for me was that it wasn't that I didn't have an encounter with the Lord. It's that the world became an idol for me, and it started to become a wall. So my younger years, I had just a direct relationship with God, and now it was like I had this wall between me and God, and I didn't know how to break through it on my own.
Was that wall the sin, or was that wall the temptation? Was it the desire? What do you think that boundary was?
I think it was a mix of sin and shame, because I think the shame kept me there, and the sin was the wall, but I think the shame was like what kept me from breaking through that wall.
I think that's interesting because like how you saying the shame is keeping me there,
Yeah.
but the sin is gonna grow.
Yeah.
Right, it doesn't stay like you said. I started watching pornography when I was in high school, and I think a lot of young men in the church. I think it's like 70 to 80% of men within the church struggle with pornography. And I was talking to somebody about this Sunday, and he was like, I was really ashamed about it, and I didn't want to say anything. I'm like, bro, I could bring 5 more guys to this conversation, and every one of them will probably say I'm either struggling with it or I struggled with it in the past.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that when we dabble in a double life, as you were kind of going into, right, we get stuck in that shame.
Yeah.
And that it seems like that's what happened to you. But it wasn't. At what point would you say, okay, I'm struggling, and now I'm living a double life?
Yeah. So, man, it wasn't really like a double life. At least I didn't think about it at that point. Now that I'm looking back, it started there. But for me in that moment, I was just like, well, I just struggle with sin, and I just don't really tell anybody, but I repent, once in a while, and I'm okay. I'm going to be good. I never imagined that sin taking root in my life and just turning into what eventually it turned into for the next, 15 years of my life.
15 years?
Oh yeah. And I think it started there, but it definitely turned into a snowball, and it just began to mature. It doesn't end with porn, it doesn't end in your bedroom. You eventually start to live out those fantasies that you build, and you start to hurt people.
So you're this pastor's kid playing the drums. Everybody thinks you're all right.
Yeah.
Right? You got your struggles, like a lot of us.
Yeah.
At what point were you like, okay, hold up, this is like, do you remember that fork in the road?
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, if I go this way, I'm going down a really bad path.
Yeah.
I have a chance not to do it. What was that moment?
For me, it was right after high school. Up until this point, still so innocent and pure in my actions, but my mind is wicked. I want to act out. I just need to find somebody.
So were you not doing? So it was pretty much having sex, right? Sleeping around.
Yeah,
That
I
was your
had
desire.
it was totally about women. And I had gotten my heart broken. I had my first girlfriend. I immediately started sleeping around with her.
And when was this during high school still?
This was right after high school. So I had just graduated high school. This is my first girlfriend, my first love. I felt like I had fallen deeply in love with this girl. I thought I was gonna marry her, and she ended up cheating on me, and it broke my heart so bad. I remember I was like depressed for like months, and I think that was my fork in the road. I think God broke me so that I could turn back to Him, but instead of turning back to Him, I went deeper into the world, and that was like when I look back at my life, that was the moment where everything just began to snowball.
During this time when because you were in high school, right? When you
Yeah.
were dating her, you were sleeping with her in high
I
school.
was right after high school.
Okay, so you're sleeping with her, you're going to church.
Yeah.
Was there anybody in your life that was like, bro, what are you doing? Who's this chick? Like, was she going to church? Because I think, again, we're going to talk about the dark road you went down, and there's a lot of things that I know you want to say, and I think that'll help
Yeah.
a lot of people. But I think there's a way to stop that, right?
Yeah.
And was there anybody in your life that was like, bro, come on, what are you
Yeah,
doing?
definitely. I think in the moment I was rejecting any sort of leadership, any sort of help. I thought that I could deal with this. I can deal with it on my own.
So you didn't look at it as like a issue, really?
Not really. I thought that this is just a normal part of life. I'm going through a heartbreak. I'm dealing with sin. Everybody deals with this. It's okay. I can just keep it in a secret, and between me and God, I'm gonna eventually work this out. But up until this point, I really think I have it under control still.
Were you thinking in that time while you're doing this, like, I'm gonna marry her eventually?
Yeah.
Like, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be part of our testimony. Did that run through your mind?
I did once when we were dating with this first girl. When we were dating, I thought, we're gonna get married one day. We're gonna make things right. I'll no longer struggle with the things I struggle with. And when she cheated on me, I kind of equated my entire life plan was surrounded around her. So she really became an idol for me. And when she broke up with me, I was so crushed. My world had shattered. My idea for my plan for my life had shattered, and I had nowhere to look except for like either I could have turned to God, but instead I just looked at more darkness. At the same time, had people in my life that were very important to me were going through similar heartbreaks, had just left the church as well,
Wow.
and they were telling me, "Don't trust women; they're just gonna hurt you. Don't just go and explore as many people as you can and go have fun." And I think at that point there was a really conflicting persona that I wanted to assume. It was like this deep desire for affection from people, and then a desire for God. I still had a deep desire for God, but the one was outweighing the other, and so I ended up turning down the darker road, which ended up being a world of a mess for me.
So what began to happen? Let's talk about that part of your testimony.
Yeah.
I mean, you sent me some notes with a lot of different stories,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I feel like we need to talk about all of them.
Yeah.
But what was that order like? Because I do want to see the progression of that, because I think a lot of people, there's this lie that people believe that I can control my sin,
Yeah.
that it's not going to get out of control. And I think your testimony is living proof that sin grows and it matures and it leads to death.
Yeah.
And so what was that progression like in your life?
So after I broke up with that first person, or we had our end, I went through a depression, and I didn't turn to God. I turned to nobody. I was in my room. I wasn't eating. I was just going through it. And up to that point, I'd never felt a pain like that. I used to laugh at people when they would say, I'm depressed, and I didn't understand it up until this point. And I'm going through this. I didn't even know what to call it. Am I depressed? I had no idea what it was. But I didn't turn to anybody. I kept it in just inside of my heart. And after a few months of that, I decided I need to go and find somebody else to go fulfill this need for intimacy. So immediately I began to scour social media and find other people to help me with this. So immediately found other women that were willing to be physically intimate with me. I remember the first time I met with another girl, immediately we slept with each other. I didn't want anything to do with her. I basically just used her. After that, I ended things with her, and I was just looking on. So I remember literally just scrolling on my followers and just looking for somebody I would want to hook up with. And from that point on, for the next, I would say 4 to 5 years, I was just hooking up with girls left and right. I mean, every month was a new girl. None of them were important to me. It was just I needed to fulfill that need for intimacy. And anytime a girl gave me attention, or if she, was interested in me in any kind of way, it validated me. It made me feel important. It made me feel like I was loved. It made me feel this sense of, I have somebody in my life. And once that itch was scratched, I would discard them, and then I needed the next fix,
Wow.
And it really became a drug. It became an addiction for me. But at this time, I didn't realize it was a drug. I was still going to church, still playing on the worship team. Nobody knew my private life. It was I was so good at keeping it a secret. I had an excuse for everything. My parents didn't know where I was at. They thought I was hanging out with friends. At this point, I'm losing my friends because I'm not hanging out with anybody.
Wow.
Every weekend, I'm going and taking girls out to dinner, going drinking with them, going partying, clubbing. All of it was just to get to more women and satisfy that need that I had for intimacy. And
So would you say that this began to become an addiction in your life?
yeah, definitely. I think I didn't realize it at the time. Up until this point, I still think that I have it under wraps.
Right.
I'm managing it. It's not out of control. It is, but I don't think so yet. I'm really still good at keeping it under wraps. I'm good at putting that persona on. Nobody knows who I am. And I'm convinced that I'm still right with God.
So were you lying to all these girls? Obviously, you're lying to them. You didn't tell them. They didn't know you went to church. They don't know any of that.
I wouldn't. I just would be really skeptical, or not skeptical. I was very hesitant to share too much personal information because it would bring me shame.
Wow.
So I put on a guise. So I would put on a mask in front of these women. They didn't have to know about everything, and so I pretty much told them whatever I needed to just get what I wanted.
Wow.
And I didn't need to be real with them at all. They weren't going to be there a long time. And then when it came to my church life, nobody knew anything about what I was doing. I didn't tell a soul. So it was a deep, dark secret that up until this point, I'm still managing, but there starts to be some bumps on the road. And I start getting to the point where I'm getting caught up little places. There was points too where the Holy Spirit would convict me because I'm still going to church. I'm still on the worship team, still living this double life. And there was moments where God would call me back and it would hit me. But the change, or the feeling and the need for God didn't last long, because my need for intimacy was getting fixed with women. And that was a quick fix. I didn't have to go through the hard pains of, being a disciple. I could just go call a girl and go find that intimacy with them. So my selfish desire was like a good enough way for me to just avoid all responsibility. So I start realizing like, okay, like this is who I am. But I still believe in my heart at this point that I'm good with God. It was really just an abuse of grace, but in my heart, I'm convinced that I'm just struggling like any other guy. And, I start realizing that I'm treating people a lot more selfishly than I would have ever before. Up until this point, I'm like, I'm still a good guy. I love girls, I would take care of any girl. I have these illusions about myself that convince me that I'm still a good, decent person.
Yeah.
And that starts to get challenged with some of my selfish actions. Like there was a time when I took this girl out and she didn't want to sleep with me. And she asked me to go buy her weed. And so I drove her to a clinic to go like take her to buy her weed. And she goes inside the clinic to go buy her weed. And I just left her in the middle of nowhere. She had no right to get home.
Oh my God.
And I actually had her purse with her phone in it. I dropped her purse off on the side of the road and I just never looked back.
Did you ever hear from her again?
No, I never heard from her again. But I blocked her on all social media after that. And so there was moments where I starting to realize, like, I look back on that and I'm like, that was pretty crappy of me.
Did this lifestyle hurt any other relationships around you? Did it affect, like, were there ever girls cheating on their boyfriends with you? Did that ever come into play?
Yeah, definitely. There were even some married women. There was, even a coworker that was married. One we started a relationship, started sleeping around with each other. And I remember I'm sitting in this bed with my coworker and we're in bed together. And I hear this noise above my head and it's her husband breaking through the window. And he comes in and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Dude, who is this guy?" And she's like, "It's my husband." And I'm like, sitting there like, wow.
Did you know she was married?
I knew she was married, but I didn't expect her husband to show up in the room at that time. So there are moments where I'm realizing like, man, this is really bad, but this is like in my mind, that was on her. Like in my mind, that's her responsibility. I'm just sleeping with a girl.
So you're just a selfish.
Yeah, at this point, the selfishness is just really growing and growing, and it's becoming. Turning into a tyrant, turning into a monster. But I'm still convinced in my mind that I'm not this monster. And there are reasons why I've convinced myself. I serve in my church. I'm a pastor's kid. Like I pray for people, and I have this illusion because of religion that I'm okay. Like I'm not gonna, and I this whole entire time, I had myself convinced that one day I'll stop. One day I'll get married and I'll settle down. I know I want to serve God one day. And whenever that time comes, I'll be able to just stop. And I had no idea that I was putting some heavy chains on myself that were not going to be very easy to take off. And
were you thinking about like, I mean, there's spiritual dangers to all that, but there's the physical, like diseases that could be transmitted, right? Like pregnancy. Yeah. Like, was that even in your head? Did you think about any of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, there were a few times I did get STDs, and there. Those were like real moments where I felt like I need to get right. I need to stop. And that moment was real. I felt like the Lord was really speaking to me in those moments, but I would always go back and I would convince myself, you know what? One more time won't hurt. I'll change next week. I'll get right, next month. And this one time is not going to hurt.
So you were just addicted to this lifestyle.
I was heavily addicted and I didn't care who I had to use and abuse to get my fix. I was an addict, and it was becoming apparent to me that I was becoming very evil, but up until this point, I'm still thinking I can change. I can go back.
What was it in your life besides, the sleeping around with all these women? What did your character begin to change? Did you begin to speak differently to people? Were you becoming rude? Like, what made you feel like, man, this is like changing me. I'm becoming a bad person.
I mean, there was a few people that I had loved, that I had really broken their hearts. Girls that I was using and convinced them that, I wanted something real with them. And there's people that I was hurting. And there were times of reflection where I would look at that and say, you know what, man, I don't like who I'm becoming. There were some people that I had physically hurt. I'd given them an STD or I was just abusing their body. And those were times of reflection. But at this point, my selfish desire is so high that it wasn't enough to change me. It was, it would change me for a minute or change me for a day. But because I wasn't going to the Lord for that change, I was just really just trying to white knuckle it and be like, I'm going to change. Yeah. It would, as soon as the next desire happened, it was that feeling was fleeting. So,
and this whole time you were still going to church? Did you never left the church?
Never left the church. I never stopped going to church. Never stopped serving. Never stopped serving on the worship team this whole time. And up until this point, there were times when I would get kind of caught with something, but never anything too big to where it was like, okay, this guy's gotta go.
There was never a moment where you just caught red-handed in this.
No, not really. I mean, there were times where I would show up to play drums at my church and I was intoxicated still from the night before. I mean, there was times when I had just literally left the bedroom of a girl and stumbled into church to play a service, and really just thinking like, it's okay, I'll repent, I'll say sorry, and we'll move on to the next week.
Did it ever get you into any other kind of trouble? This lifestyle?
Definitely did. So like I was affecting people's marriages at this point, probably ruining marriages.
So you were having multiple affairs. Like it wasn't just one time with the married woman.
Oh yeah. I don't even know how many, probably. I wouldn't really try to get into those details, but I would know, there was times where I knew what I was doing and I didn't care. Yeah. It was that to me in my selfish mind at that time, it was like, that was on them. Wow. any way I could avoid responsibility and deflect, I would. You know, I at this time I'm even convincing myself that I am who I am because I have weak leadership. I have, you know, people that should be telling me certain things in my life and they're not, and so that's why I'm the way I am. Any way I could negate responsibility, I was doing that. You know, and you know, and then there were times. There's a time when I was, because at this point I have a full blown business of having sex with women. I had a structured plan. I would go on dating websites. You know, 24/7 I was swiping away on dating websites. I would match with, you know, anybody I thought was pretty. I would go and take them out and try to sleep with them. And I mean, I had personal challenges even because my pride is growing. You know, I have all these women that are giving me attention and it's filling my ego. And so my ego is puffed up. I think I'm the man. I'm having personal competitions. I'm competing with myself on how many women I can sleep with in a week. How many women I had this fantasy to just try to sleep with, you know, 3 women in a day, and just personal challenges for debauchery. And I was just trying to, you know, achieve the next thing. And once I would achieve one thing, it was like, okay, you know, can I have, you know, a threesome or, you know, any fantasy that I can try to live out. It was a goal of mine. And so, and then obviously that comes with some repercussions. And so one day I'm on a dating website and I'm trying to, you know, match with girls, and I matched with this girl. I think she's beautiful. She tells, you know, I'm, you know, getting to know this person very, you know, very vague because I don't need to know too much about them. And she tells me, oh, I'm a witch, you know, and I'm like, you're a witch. Okay. You're obviously weird, but you know, witches aren't real.
Yeah.
So, she tells me she's a witch and I don't even care. So we meet up, and obviously we're meeting up to have sex. I get invited to her apartment. We go and we sit down and we do our thing. You know, we have sex, and then we're sitting in her bed. And so I start like getting curious about this, you know, because I've had spiritual life. I've you know, heard about demons in that dark world. And up until this point, I haven't really touched it too much, but I'm curious, you know, and I'm like, hey, why do you say you're a witch? Like, what's up with that? She's like, well, I am a witch. And I'm like, okay, like what makes you a witch? Why do you say that? She's like, oh, I come from a family of witches. Like my mom's a witch. My great grandma's a witch. Like all my family and my ancestors, we've always been witches. And when I was a girl, you know, I got taught how to be a witch from my mom. It's like a career, you know? And I'm like, okay, what do they do? And she's like, what they teach us to pray to spirits, and these spirits come and talk to us, and they teach us how to do things. They teach us how to do spells. And
are you getting creeped out as she's saying this at all?
I think she's just a pathological liar. I'm like,
so you think she's just being weird for the sake of being weird?
I just think she's making it up at the time. And because, you know, up until this point, I don't think that any of that's real. You know, those are just made up fables.
So you believed in God.
I believed in God,
but you didn't believe in the dark.
Not that
dark
deep.
Side of the
I thought like
realm.
You know, people do weird things, but like witches, you know, I didn't think that was real. And but so I'm like, okay, so like you say you talk to spirits, what do they look like? What do they sound like? Do you hear them? Do you see them? She's like, oh, I hear them like I'm hearing you. Like they talk to me. And I'm like, do you see them? She's like, well, at first I used to see them, but now I don't see them. You know, they just talk to my mind. And I was like, what do they look like? She's like, they look like shadow people. And I'm just like, you know, I've heard stories of demons, and I've heard them described as shadow people. And I'm like, okay, I think you're talking about demons, you know? And like, I never really seen one up in my face. So up until this point, I'm just kind of like, okay, this is starting to become a little bit more real and a little bit more scary.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I don't think those are your friends. And she's like, no, they are my friends. Like she tells me the story about how one of the spirits, she calls them, gives her a number to call, a random number. And she calls the number on her phone, and it's a number to this party. And this random guy answers, and he's like, hey, are you calling about the party? And she's like, I don't know why I'm calling. Like somebody told me to call this number. And he's like, yeah, come through to the party. Like you're a girl, come through to the party. And she's like, it was the most amazing party in Hollywood Hills. And like literally a demon invited her to this party.
Oh my God.
And so she knows these demons very well. They talk to her and they give her instructions. She's like, I can make people fall in love. I can make people die if I want to. I can do anything I want to people with spells. And my spirits teach me how to make these spells. Jeez. And so we're talking about this, and there's no light in the room. There's only this there's a window, and the only light that's shining in the room is the light from the street that's shining through this window. So it's very dim light. Most of the room is pitch dark. And so I'm facing her this way, and the window's behind me. And out of the corner of my eye, I see just like a little like flash, like something just passes by. And I'm like, I didn't even acknowledge it. And I'm listening to her tell this story. And then I see it again. And then I look and she goes, they're here.
Oh,
and
no.
instantly this paralyzing feeling of fear entered my body. And I just like, I literally know, I know what I've seen. I seen what I saw. And now this girl has acknowledged that she saw it too. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they're here. I saw that
I gotta
too.
go.
Yeah. And so it was kind of an instinct. I'm telling you, I hadn't, up until this point, I haven't read my Bible in years. I haven't prayed in years. I'm going to church, but I have no relationship with God. I am just under a complete illusion that I'm saved. And I stood up on top of that bed and my instincts just told me to pray in tongues. So I didn't say any prayer. I didn't even say God's name. I just started speaking in tongues. And this girl starts screaming. Mind you, this is like maybe 3:00 in the morning. We're in an apartment complex. She starts screaming at the top of her lungs like if somebody was murdering her. And she screams. As soon as she starts screaming, it was like this gust. All the windows are closed. There's only one window. There's only one door. The door's closed. This gust of wind, it lasted maybe 3 seconds. And I'm talking about an intense gust of wind, like a tornado hit the room. All the stuff on her dressers all flew off the dresser. This huge wind just, and it was over. And the spirits were gone. Like whatever it was, those demons, literally as soon as I started speaking in tongues, this girl is still screaming. She goes, "Get out!" And I'm like, I am leaving. Like, you don't have to ask me. I grab as many clothes as I can and I run. I sprint out. And I run to my car half naked. I'm sitting in the parking lot. I put all my stuff down and I'm sitting there and I couldn't even help. I just start like chuckling, laughing. Because up until this point, my faith was really tested. I mean, there were moments where I was really doubting if God was real at all. I was, I would have moments where I'd be like, maybe this isn't real. I was the type of person that liked tangible evidence. I loved researching things. I loved, finding out about space and all these different things that you can learn. And I couldn't explain God with science. And so up until this point, I'm really being tested. And when I got into that car, I sat there in that chair and I said, God is real. Like, he's real. But what I couldn't figure out was, why would God show up for me? I am high. I'm on drugs. I just slept with the witch. I haven't prayed or read my Bible. Like, why would, and that's up until this point, that's like the most tangible thing I've ever seen. I mean, it was, and the fact that somebody else was in the room with me experiencing it, it was like, wow, I can't deny what just happened. Wow. And the first thing I did was I called Daniel Hernandez and I put him on the phone and I'm like, dude, I don't know how to tell you this, but like, this is what I'm doing. This is who I am.
So you told him everything? I
didn't tell him everything. Okay. I just told him just that situation, There was too much shame for me to uncover everything.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't understand how God showed up for me right now. And he was just like, that's God. It doesn't matter who you are. He loves you. He's there for you. He wants you. And I think that at that point, I really was just struggling to understand God's love. And I remember just crying because I was just like, God, I don't understand how you can love me right now. Like, wow. I'm looking at my life and I'm like, this is just you. This is too much for me to handle. Like, everybody in my life has rejected me. All these women have rejected me. All these people have rejected me. And in my worst moment, you didn't reject me. I called and you answered. And that was phenomenal for me, but it wasn't enough to change me.
So you just woke up the next day like, that was cool.
Oh, it's kind of comical. It's sad. But the next week I messaged the witch girl again because I wanted to hook up with her again. But
did she respond?
No, she blocked me because after speaking in tongues, she blocked. Actually, she was like, never speak like that again. And yeah, she blocked me after that. So I couldn't entertain that. But
so you just kept going back to lifestyle.
Oh, I was right back at it. I mean, it was enough to show me that God was real, but it wasn't enough to change me because I just was still trying to do it on my own might. I didn't people say, you're doing it on your own strength. I heard that all my life, doing it on your own strength or like give it up to God. And I'm like, how do you do that? Like, I want to change. I want to do good, but I don't know how to get there. And I don't know what it means to not do it on your own. Like, I don't even know what that means.
So was this moment the start of going back to God, or was it the continuation of going?
It actually got a little bit worse after that, but that was the moment.
How much worse could it get than that?
It could get really bad. It got actually much worse. Yeah. And
can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, of course. So
hey, we're gonna get right back into the episode, but before we do, I want to thank our sponsors, David Hernandez Ministries, as well as our Bold community partners. Hey, if you want to help us keep these podcasts going, you could sign up as a monthly partner on our website. Now let's get back to the video.
After that, kept doing my thing. I was still in the business of sleeping with girls. That was my MO. I was very proud of it. I had people that I would show off to. I would let all my worldly friends know, like, look at who I'm hooking up with now. Look at my inventory. Look at who I've done it with. And I had this rap sheet that I was so proud of. I was so elevated because of this, because these women were validating me. But little did anybody know, deep down in my heart, I am just this weak little hurt boy that is just needs these women to validate him. Otherwise, he's sitting at home crying because nobody loves him, because everybody rejects him, because I couldn't make one relationship work. I mean, even if I wanted to, it was like, as soon as they found out the real me, they wanted to run away. And I just felt so rejected by everybody that it was just, it was this illusion, and I needed to keep it up. I needed to keep up the act. Otherwise I was going to get uncovered. Everybody was going to find out who I really was. I wasn't this confident man. I was this weak, frail person that didn't want anybody to know. And so, I started, I was working a lot. I was making good money, but I'm spending all my money on women. I'm spending all my time trying to get women, trying to play the part like I'm the man, trying to show off my money, take them to expensive dinners. I would go on work trips, out of town. And the whole time I'm just trying to hook up with girls. I would travel long distances to go meet with women. And, this one time I traveled to San Diego to go meet with a girl. And up until this point, we had been messaging, she had, we had a few calls, and I knew this girl was a real girl. I go and meet with her. It was actually a trap set up by the cartel. And I end up meeting her and finding this dude, he's got a gun, and he's, he basically is holding me hostage, and he's like, you're going to give me all the money in your bank account, or I am going to ruin your life. I have all your information. I have your address. I have everybody that you follow on Instagram. I know your mom. I know everybody. And if you don't give me all the money in your bank account, I'm gonna do some damage to you. I was so scared. I'm sitting there and I'm just like, this is not what I was expecting. And I'm just a young man, coming from La Mirada. I don't know any crime. I've never experienced, I've never even seen a gun pointed at me. And my instinct, we're in a hotel room, my instinct was to run. So that's what I did. And I didn't know if I was going to die. I thought I was probably going to get shot in the back of my head. And if I didn't, then my life was still going to be ruined. So I run out of there as fast as I can. He doesn't chase me, doesn't pursue me. But he does message a bunch of people that I know. And he sends them pictures of me that I had sent to this girl, tries to ruin my life. And yeah, I just ran away from that situation, and I didn't give him my money. Luckily, I didn't have much money to give him. If he only knew that I didn't have much,
you should just give it to him.
I probably should have, but I think that it was just my instinct was just run. Like, this guy has a gun. Like, he's probably gonna kill you anyways. Just run as fast as you can. So I ran. But I did get people that messaged me and said, "Hey, this person sent me messages that were very, very explicit." And
Was it people that you respected?
Oh yeah, there's some people that I respected, and I still, to this day, I still don't know everybody that got a piece of that. I kind of just swept it under the rug when it was just kind of like.
Was there anybody from church?
There were some people from church, some friends. Luckily, like most of the people, I was kind of like, it wasn't people that were prominent enough in my life to where I was like, okay, my whole secret life is gonna get uncovered. I can just tell these people like, hey, dude, my bad. I'm sorry. It was like some weird thing that I got into. Like, don't tell anybody, please.
Yeah.
And so, I still don't know how far that went. I don't know if people just, they didn't say anything. I don't know everybody who got it. I don't know who they sent it to. I just know that it was a real threat, and I mean, they took some action. Luckily, I didn't die and get hurt in any kind of way. And for a season of my life, I mean, it was a couple months where I was living in fear. I remember I bought a gun, and I was just kind of like sitting there, like waiting for the cartel to show up at my door one day. And at this point, I'm like, dang, dude, like I'm starting to realize like this is becoming unmanageable. Like I'm gonna ruin my life. I'm beginning to ruin my life. I work really hard, have nothing to show for it. People are finding out about all this stuff. I remember this one time I went to this party with a girl that I met online, and I go to this party, and I'm not a big party type person, but I dabbled in some drugs. I'd done some mediocre things, and sitting at this party, and this girl that I'm hooking up with just starts snorting coke right in front of me, and me being stupid, and I was also drunk at the time. I recorded it to show all my like worldly friends what was going on, and because I was drunk, I accidentally posted it on my social media, and a bunch of my friends like from church like knew and saw it, and I like deleted it really quick, but enough people saw that like people were like talking about it, and so at this point people are starting to
And
really.
you're just lying when it's brought to you. You just
a lot
lying,
of it
or?
I can't lie at this point,
Right.
but I'm just kind of like just trying my hardest to keep my life under wraps. And at this point, many people really starting to know the real me, and they know that I got a lot of secrets, and I'm really just trying to manage it, but it's becoming a disaster. I'm everywhere I'm looking, things are slipping. People are telling people this, and it's starting to get uncovered, and it's really becoming unmanageable. And yeah, that's eventually I get to the point where I want to change. I really want to. And then that goes into the season where I have my son. And I remembered I was hooking up with this girl. I was actually kind of like sort of living with her. I was at her house spending the night enough times where it felt like I was living with her. And I remember like she caught me with a bunch of stuff from other women in my phone because she thought I was loyal to her, and she didn't know the real me. And I remember like feeling kind of bad about it, and I was just like, man, God, how am I gonna ever? I remember thinking like, how am I ever supposed to go back to God? Like, there's no way. Like, I don't know how I could stop this. I don't know how I could stop. I had tried to quit many times. I had tried to quit smoking. I tried to quit partying, and I just have no idea how I'm gonna stop this. And I remember saying a prayer to God, and I'm like, God, if there's any way out of this, please help me. Like, I don't know. I am scared of my future, and I don't know that I could ever stop this. Like, I really need your help. And it was kind of just like a prayer I thoughtlessly prayed, but God kind of came through on it in a way that I didn't expect, that brought a lot of pain in my life. But I ended up getting a phone call one day. I'd been hooking up with girls so much. Like, I mean, there's no way to keep track of it. At this point, I don't even know how many girls I've hooked up with. I don't know, I would get people talking to me on the street like, hey, do you remember me? I have no idea who you are.
Jeez.
Like, I couldn't, there were so many instances, so many encounters. I mean, I could sit here for days and tell you stories about stories and stories and stories. And so and part of it was I was on drugs, and I didn't have a lot of memory anymore. And at this point, I'd been smoking for over 10 years. And I know at this point, I'm realizing who I am. I'm not a Christian, but I am too scared to leave the church. I'm just, because then my reputation is like, I needed this illusion to keep up, so I could keep up. I needed people to think that I was Christian. I didn't want anybody to know that I wasn't. I needed that. And one day I get this random text, and it's a random number, and it's like, hey, I just want to let you know that you have a son, and he's 4 months old, and I just want to let you know you're the father. And I remember I got that text, and my first instinct was like, I'm going to block this number. This has got to be a prank. But in my heart, I knew, like, with how many people I've slept with, this is probably real, Yeah. And out of fear, I just was, like I said, I was just, any way I can negate responsibility for my actions, I was going to do that. So I blocked the number, and I was like, it must have been a prank. I was convincing myself that it was a prank. And then, the next day I get somebody that adds me on Instagram and then messages me and says, hey, sorry I scared you, but I'm just letting you know that this is definitely your son. If you don't want to be his dad, you don't have to be in his life. Just let me know. We'll get a test done, if he's not yours, or if he is yours and you don't want to be in his life, like, you'll never see us again. And so I was like, that kind of made it more real for me. And I also took the pressure off, because I'm like, oh, cool, I don't have to be his dad. Like, all right, let's get the test done, And in my heart, I knew it didn't matter what the test results were. I was not going to be the father of this child. And I remember thinking, like, there's no way I'm fit to be a dad. I'm a terrible man. Like, no, this kid, I'd be doing this kid a favor to not be his dad. And so I take the test, and sure enough, he's mine. And I remember his mom, she was like, well, I'll give you some time to think about this. Take a couple weeks. And if you want to be in his life, like, I never had a dad, so I'll give him the opportunity that I never had for you to be in his life. And I remember at the time I was living with my roommate, who was actually an amazing Christian.
Do we know him? Do I know him?
Yeah. His name, I mean, I don't know if I could say his name, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind. His name is Fabio. And he was actually a really good friend. And I remember, like, constantly comparing my Christian walk with his. And I remember just thinking, like, this guy is on another level. Like, he's a true man of God, and I am just a faker. Like, I remember just realizing, like, this is what a real man of God looks like, and I am nothing like him.
Jeez.
And I lived with him for a portion of time, and he caught me with a lot of stuff, and he was very gracious with me, and he would talk to me about it and give me some real advice. And I was just, at this point, there's no way anybody can help me. There's no way any program could have helped me. There's no way that anybody but God could help me. And so I get the test done, and I remember my heart was crushed. I remember thinking, because I was just so filled with my selfish desires, I had these aspirations to be rich and to be, somebody of notable, somebody that people looked up to. But I equated that with wealth and with success. And I was so wrapped up in, like, the success mindset. It was part of my facade, right? I had this mask, and part of that was like, oh, like, I have all these aspirations to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to do something with all that one day. But eventually, so after she sends me that text, I'm praying. I'm sorry, I'm not praying. I'm driving to work, and I haven't prayed in forever, but I decide, you know what? I should probably start praying. I should probably start reading my Bible again. Like, it's been a really, really long time since I've done any of those things, and I should probably start, because I'm ruining my life. I remember I was just, like, crying, like, God, and it was all just so selfish. I was crying to God, like, God, make this not true. Make this not true, because I didn't want to be this kid's dad, but I couldn't reckon with the fact that I was going to be abandoning a child. I've always had a great father in my life. I've always had my parents present, and my Christian roommate didn't have a father, and I saw how much it affected him, and I couldn't help but see him and think, my son is going to have that same feeling about me one day. He's going to always question, why didn't my dad be in my life? And so there was this conflict. I wanted to just say, no, I'm not going to do it. But it wasn't an easy decision, and I was wrestling with it. But down deep in my heart, I knew I wasn't going to do this. And so I started praying, right? And I remember at this time I'm working in Orange, and I'm driving from Long Beach to Orange, and I'm crying. And I decided to open up my phone and open up to the Bible. And I opened up to the book of Daniel. And by the way, my son's name is Azariah. So I'd never heard this name up at this point. I'd never, I didn't know it was a biblical name. I had no idea anything. I just had a picture of him and his name. That was it. And so I opened up to the book of Daniel, and I start reading from chapter 1. And it's a story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And like in children's church, they teach you that those are their names. And I had no idea that their original names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Wow. So I'm reading this story. It's actually, the Bible app is reading to me, right? And I just hear his name over and over, Azariah, Azariah, Azariah. And I'm just sitting there. And I remember that, like, the first time I heard it, I'm like, is that his name? And the second time I'm like, oh, that's his name. Like, and I look at the text message, and I look at the way it's spelled in the Bible app, and I'm like, what the heck? That's his name? Like, his name is in the Bible? And instantly, like, I felt this weight. I was riddled with anxiety up until this point. Like, I was anxious about everything, because I was living such a life of shame. I had such a double standard in my life. I was just way down in every part of my life. I had anxiety. I was just like, I could never be myself. I was always playing a role, and I was so scared, always constantly living in fear of who was going to know about what. Is this world ever going to find out about this world? And is this world going to ever find out about this world? And so I was filled with anxiety. And in that moment, as soon as I heard his name, this wave of peace. And I just like, I almost had forgot what peace felt like. I remember like feeling the peace just enter my car, and I just took a deep breath and I just started crying. But I was like joyfully crying. And I was just like, everything's going to be okay. I don't have to be scared about anything. And I just knew at that moment, God was telling me, you need to be this child's father. You need to be there, and everything's going to work out. And up until this point, I'm just like so scared of what my parents are going to say, so scared of what people at church are going to say, so scared of ruining my plans for my future. And I just knew in that moment, nothing else mattered. I needed to do this. Wow. So immediately I called his mom and I was like, hey, I want to do this. And she was like, are you sure? You know, you don't want to this? And I was like, nope, let me meet him today. I need to do this. So I go and meet him. And I remember like instantly, like we started, you know, I started having him every weekend. And I remember having him, and I'm almost ashamed to just say this, but you know, it's the first time I'm telling my story, so I want to uncover all these things. But I remember having my son for the first, and it wasn't like, you know, there was a pregnancy. He was already born. He was already alive and well. He was 4 months old. So I'm holding this baby. It felt like somebody just threw their baby on me. And I'm like, if you guys knew who I was, you would never put a baby in my hands, you know? And so I'm holding this baby and I'm just looking at him and I'm just like, I felt all this resentment towards him because he was keeping me from doing what I wanted to do. I remember holding him and thinking, I want to go party and go out with these girls this weekend. And now I have to stay home with you. And all you do is cry. And it was such a, you know, a reflecting moment and realizing like, I am so selfish, you know, and I know this, I'm selfish, but I don't know how to change myself. And so there was a deep desire at that point to change, but I had no way of working that out.
Were you still living that lifestyle?
Oh yeah, definitely. I was still, but it had to stop on the weekends because I had my son on the weekends.
Right.
So Monday through Friday, I was acting out. Friday to Sunday, I was at home. I had to be, you know?
And so what point was it, what was the second fork in the road where you're like, you know what?
Yeah.
I got to start doing what's right. Was there a moment?
Yeah.
Was it gradual? How did that look for you?
Yeah. So God brought me back all the way back to that moment where it all started. He brought me back to the same heartbreak. I had started seeing this girl. We were in a very toxic relationship, you know, just like all my relationships. But I kind of fall in love with this girl. And up until this point, my relationships were lasting like maybe a week, maybe a couple months, and they were ending. But this girl I had an affection for. I started to really like her, desire her, want something a little bit more serious with her, becoming a little bit older. And I like the stability of a committed relationship. I'm like starting to look at that like maybe this is the next thing, you know, maybe sleeping around isn't doing it for me. Maybe like this person can do this for me. And I started pursuing her, and we started, you know, hooking up and dating. And I really felt like I felt like I had fallen in love with her. Just like the first girl, you know, the first girl I had dated, I thought I really was in love with her. And I started, you know, imagining a life with her. You know, I wanted to get serious, maybe even marry this girl. You know, she had a background in church just like me. And I thought, okay, maybe we'll get this right. You know, we're sleeping together, but, you know, once we're done with all that, we'll get married and we'll start going to church and we're going to start a family together. And so she started taking God very serious, because I remember I told her one time, I said, you know, if we're going to date, I think you should start. I wasn't even concerned about my life. I just wanted an obedient wife.
Wow.
I didn't care about me. And so I remember I told her, like, if we start dating, I think like you should start going to church, because I want to date a girl who's like, you know, a Christian, because that's probably a girl I can easily control, you know? And she really liked me, and she started going to church. I remember the next week after I told her that, she started going to a church, and I was just like, okay, like, right, I like that. But I was going to church, but I wasn't concerned with changing any part of my life. I'm like, oh, I go to church already, I'm good. And so she starts taking her walk very serious. She starts getting very committed to God. She gets baptized, and she totally commits her life to God in a really good church. She builds a very healthy community. And of course, her community looks at me and they're like, you need to leave this loser. He's hurt you. He's already cheated on you. You need to dump him. And that was really good advice from them. And so she did that. She ended up dumping me, and God brought me back to that same hurt little boy that I was when I was 19. And I remember I was so crushed by it. I went weeks without eating. I was so depressed. And I remember I looked at my entire life and I looked back at it and I just remember looking up to God and saying, you know what, God, I'm done losing. I need to stop. I am ruining my life. I've tried everything. Up until this point, I've had orgies. I've had every fantasy that I have wanted to desire, or anything that I wanted to explore. I've pretty much explored it all, and nothing fulfilled me. Everything left me feeling empty. Everything just made me feel so dead inside. And finally, I'm back at this point, and I'm like, okay, God, I think I want to do this. But there was still this selfish desire. I only really wanted to go back to God because I wanted the girl back.
Right.
But God met me there. He looked at that position and he said, I can use that. And so I got really desperate, and I'm talking about really, really desperate for God. I started pleading with God. I was crying on the floor every single day. And when I say I'm crying, I mean, I'm pounding the floor, screaming at God, God, please, please don't take her away. Please. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything that I've done. I'll change. Just bring her back and I'll change. Just bring her back and you can have me. And I remember that lasted for like 3 months.
Wow.
And I didn't hear from God at all for 3 months. No sign from God. I was reading my Bible. I became so focused on getting this girl back, and I knew that God was the only way I could do it. And so it was really a selfish motivation, but God definitely used it. And I remember slowly but surely I remember I didn't sin, not because I didn't want to sin, but I was so scared that if I sinned, God wasn't going to hear my prayer and he wasn't going to give me the girl back. So I stopped watching porn for the first time in probably since I was like 15. I stopped sleeping around with other girls. I didn't even stop sleeping around with other girls when I was with her. But as soon as she left me, I stopped.
Wow.
And I remember I started just praying every day. I'm telling you, I started losing my hair. I was going through so much stress. I was growing, white hairs. Literally, I was growing gray hairs. I was under so much stress every single night up until this point. Literally, as soon as she broke up with me, every night I would wake up in the middle of the night and instantaneous anxiety and stress, like to the point where, I had never experienced so much stress and anxiety. It was spiritual warfare. The enemy did not want to let me go. And I remember sitting in bed squirming. I remember just at night just squirming because I wanted to have sex so bad. And it really felt like I was just, going through a detox type thing. And I remember just squirming. I wanted to watch porn so bad. I'm like, God, please, I can't do this. I can't do this, God. I need to just release this, and like, I remember just feeling so desperate for love. And I almost had love in my hands. I almost had it. And it got stripped away from me. And I'm like, God, if you could just bring that love back, bring it. I thought he was going to bring it back in her. And little by little, I remember feeling these waves of emotion. I would wake up in the middle of the night filled with anxiety, and I would pray myself back to sleep. And it was the only thing that could bring me back to sleep is just praying. I would wake up in the morning filled with anxiety, and I would pray and I would read. And for a moment, I had peace. And then I would go to work and anxiety would hit again. And it was just like, an all-out war for my soul. It was like I could literally feel the two parties just at war with each other. Like my anxiety, the darkness, desire to act out, and then God. And it was just like this tug and pull constant. And this lasted months. I'm talking about at least 3 months.
And you weren't sleeping around. I
wasn't sleeping around. I was totally committed to spiritual warfare because I wanted the girl back. And then I remember by the 3rd month, my desires started to change. I remember I was desiring less of sleeping around. I deleted social media. I was going through full detox. I was off dating websites for the first time in years, off social media. I ended up taking like almost an entire 1.5 year break from social media, which was super healthy for me. But I completely just detoxed of everything, and I just got in front of God. And I'm talking about, I was praying. I had nothing to do on my phone but read the Bible. So before I was just a tyrant. Every time I was looking at my phone, I was trying to hit up people. To now, the only app I have on my phone is the Bible app. And so I only have 2 options for myself to get intimacy. I couldn't run to the world anymore. I cut that off. The only thing I have to get intimacy is God. And he starts to fill that need. I was running to the world for so long, and I was getting my scratch from women, and then finally I'm now realizing, oh my gosh, the need that I have for intimacy can be found in the Lord. I would get before the Lord and I would weep and I would cry and I could be totally myself without any judgment. I could be, this scared little boy, and God didn't care who I was. He loved me just like that. I didn't have to put on this facade. I could take off all the masks and he just accepted me right there just as I was. But he loved me right where I was, but he loved me too much to leave me that way. And I had no idea, up until this point, I never thought I could quit porn. I never thought I could stop sleeping around. I never thought I could quit drugs. And for first time in my life, I'm looking back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have 3 months sobriety. I can't believe this. Like,
Wow.
But it wasn't just, white knuckling it. At this point, I'm really giving it up to God. And I'm starting to understand what it means to give it up to God, to rely on the Lord's strength. And I'm like, when I don't read the Bible, I need to go somewhere for this. When I don't pray, I need to go somewhere for this. And if I don't get it from God, I'm going to go back to the world. So I become very desperate. And by the end of the third month, my prayer life has completely changed, where all I'm doing is praying for this girl. And now I'm like, God, I don't care if she ever comes back. I'm okay. Like, just you never leave me. I don't want you to ever leave me. Like, I can't believe who I'm becoming. Like, it's only been 3 months, but wow, I'm sober. I haven't gone to women. Like, I don't think I might never go back. This might be a real thing. Like, I might be able to say that, like, this is a change that might last forever. And it did. Month 4 and 5 go by and I am committed. I won't go a day without reading my word. I realize that the battle is no longer in what I can do. My battle is just in my word and in the prayer room. Like, I could never have changed, like I stopped worrying about me stopping watching porn. I stopped worrying about trying to do the right thing. And my only battle became my time with God. That was my whole battle. If I didn't do that, I didn't care if I messaged someone. I didn't care if I did anything wrong. My battle was my time with the Lord. That was my whole fight. It started and ended right there. And that's where I got my breakthrough. That's where it was like, I finally started to look and say, man, this is what I've been missing this whole time. And the love that I felt from God, that I still, when I think about how much he's done in my life, I break down, because I have done so much dirt. I've done so much wickedness. For him to look at me and still say, you know what? I still love you enough to take you out of all of that and use you and do something with you. It's something I might never understand, how much he loves me. So I start finding this breakthrough and it becomes more and more real for me. And then, at this point, I'm starting to desire community. Up until this point, I'm totally isolated with God. It's just me and God. I have no friends.
Are you still going to church or no?
Still going to church, but I don't have community there.
Right.
And it wasn't any fault of the church. It was, I still held this shame.
Wow.
There was still this deep sense of shame of, I can't let anybody know who I really am. I really needed to go to somebody who didn't know me, that I could just spill my guts and be like, hey, this is who I really am. Like, I need to tell you this,
Yeah.
And so I found this program called Celebrate Recovery, and it's an amazing Christian program. It's kind of like church for addicts. And I found this recovery program at the time, this girl's church. She had, she was still going to this church. We had broken up. But I had found the program at the church. It's not affiliated with the church, but it's hosted by the church. Right. And this is in Brea, California. It's called Celebrate Recovery, led by Pastor Deanna. And through this program, I find this place, this outlet where I can go and totally unveil myself. There's guys there that were just like me. There's a lot of guys there that were much worse than me, And I was able to sit in these rooms and confess my sins openly, and all the shame was just lifted off. There was like nothing you couldn't say in those rooms. I mean, there was people in those rooms where I would look at their story and be like, wow, you're way worse than me, you know?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and that gave me the outlet to just be able to freely confess and be open with finally who I am. This is the real me. Like I'm a pretty wicked guy and I've done a lot of dirt, and and once, and there's more to that program. You start off with just like these services where you go and you invite God into the room, and then you guys you go and you split off into little mini groups, and all you're doing is hi, my name is Daniel and I'm a sex addict. And for the first time in my life, I'm sitting in a room and full of people that are real, and I'm saying I'm a sex addict. This is who I am. Like this is the me that I've been hiding from everybody. I'm a sex addict. I'm a drug addict. I am X, Y, and Z, and I need help. And we start going through these steps. There's this thing called step study that they go through, and you go through 12 steps. It's all biblical. They basically spoon feed you recovery through a biblical lens. So it's not like recovery in the world where it's
Right.
just like, I don't know how those programs go, but this is biblical recovery. This is true recovery, because I think those programs are great, but those people who get recovered from those programs, they just find like healthier places to go, explore their addictions. So
Right.
their addictions don't end. They just replace them with other addictions. Where this program was like, replace your addiction with God, and we start uncovering, part of the steps is you got to go and you got to, first you release all power. You realize that you are powerless against your addictions. You have your addictions have more power than your will to do good.
Right.
And you realize that you're powerless. The second part is that you begin to release that power to God, and you give him the power. So that's really what was happening is I finally stopped trying to do good and be good, and I gave all that to God. And my only responsibility now is just me and God. That's it. All the power to stop, I've proved to myself I can't do it. And so I gave all that to God. And then, part of the program, you get sponsors. And so I had a sponsor named Rogelio, and he was just like me. His story was so similar. He even I have a background in wrestling. He wrestled. And I got to see like he had destroyed his marriage. And I got to see like basically what would happen to me if I didn't stop.
Right.
I was going to destroy my marriage. I was going to hurt a ton of people more than I have. It could get even worse than as bad as it got. And so in part of that program, you make a moral inventory of your life. So we began to literally make a list of every wrongdoing I've ever done since I was a kid. So you got to imagine, like, if you make a list of everything you can think of that you can remember of things that you've done wrong, that's going to be a pretty hefty list. So, I mean, some of those things I haven't even shared here. Like, some of these things are just so deep and dark. The things that you don't tell anybody, you write them down on this moral inventory, and you write who's responsible for it. Sometimes it's things that have been done wrong to you. And you start to uncover all this junk that you didn't even realize was there, and then you go and confess it to your sponsor. So you go and make a complete confession to them, and you're sitting in this room for like more than an hour, just letting this person know every deep, dark thing that you've held a secret for so tight for so long.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, the freedom that comes with a confession that's that deep is just phenomenal. I remember walking out of the room just like, oh my gosh, like I don't have to hold that anymore. Like I don't have to hold all that junk. I've been holding it on for so long, and I don't have to do that anymore. Like it's all out there. And then the second part of that is after you make the confession, you go and make an amends with all the people you've hurt.
Wow.
As long as it doesn't hurt them or yourself, you go and you make apologies. And so, and then you also offer forgiveness to those who have hurt you. And that's some very like deep biblical principles, but up until this point, I wasn't reading the Bible. I didn't know these things, so I needed somebody to spoon feed it for me. And so I made an amends with anybody that I could remember, anybody that I knew it wouldn't hurt them. And I went and I made my apologies to many people. There's some people I'm sure that, were left out because I lost contact with them or I couldn't remember or whatever it might have been. But the freedom that came from that was just like phenomenal. I just remember just walking out of that program feeling like, and by this time I've been walking with the Lord, and I just realized, that it all, for me, I was able to really uncover that shame is what kept me under bondage. the shame that I was holding on so tight made me a liar. It made me so tied to who I was. I had to really what it is pride, because you create this image and you don't want that image to fold. You need to keep it up. And it's shame, if they find out the real me, then my pride's done. It's gonna humble me, and it kept me under bondage. But being able to just openly confess and release all that, and then once you do the huge inventory, you just keep it up. He's like, when you fall, I could just go back to my sponsor, and with no judgment, he's just gonna listen to me and hear me out, and I can live this open life where there's a window to my life. And since then, I've relapsed multiple times. Like, I realized that like my walk with God is not dependent on my actions, because the moment that I'm depending on my ability to do right and wrong,
right,
I'm going to fall. I'm going to collapse. I have no power over this. My war is with God. I have to get on my knees, I have to pray, and that's my battle. And the moment that I stop that, I'm just one decision away from going back to the old me. And so like, I have no pride in my ability to stay sober. I know that, relapse is part of it. Relapse is part of recovery. That's what they teach you. And, I don't know, theologically, some people might get their feathers ruffled by that, but
yeah,
I believe that I am righteous because the Lord has made me righteous. I stand here as a righteous man because of God's grace, because of what he did on the cross, not because of anything that I could do. That grace and that sacrifice he made on the cross enables me to go and live a more righteous life in my actions. But that's the byproduct. It doesn't start with your actions. The actions
right,
is just like a natural reaction of that process. But the moment I start looking at my recovery and my ability to stay recovered, it's gonna fall, dude. I mean, if that was the case, then anytime I relapsed, I would have gone straight back and dove
right,
head first right back into it. But I've been able to stay recovered because understanding that principle that like it's God's grace,
yeah,
and God accepts me, and I can go and approach him even after I sin, even after I've relapsed, even after, I've gone back. I can come back and say, you know what, God, I am broken. I need you at every moment, at every hour.
So would you say now that this is like the first time that it's like, man, this is a real thing?
I would say this is the real thing. And the reason why is because I have a real grasp on grace, where it's not an abusive thing where I'm just running rampant. I understand that God made, my heart breaks for the things that break his now. My heart mourns for sin. Like when I sin, it's not just this thing that's, oh, well, my heart breaks with God. And I realize that I put God on the cross. I'm the one who did that. Every action that I take against him, I do that to him. And so that's what makes it real for me. And understanding that it's this attitude of being poor in spirit. I am totally dependent on the Lord. And without him, I am just the same man. I mean, I was just telling my friend the other day, because he was asking me, I've been able to help a lot of men through this because I've gone through it. And I remember telling one of my friends and telling him, I am the exact same guy I was back then. Like, I still have the same desires. My will to refrain from all that is the same. The only difference now is that I have God. And why do I have God? It's because I spend time with him every day. And the moment I stop that, the moment I neglect my responsibilities with the Lord, I'm just going to be right back. And that's the only wall that keeps me from that old man, is my relationship with him.
Yeah.
So
It's funny. I was talking to one of the guys at our church about this similar stuff like this. We just released a video about pornography. And he goes, man, it must be really, you probably were nervous making that video, worried about what people would think about you or say about you. And I go, actually I wasn't. I said, because that's not who I am anymore.
yeah.
Like, I've been like, that's the old guy. There's this new creation, right? And I think your testimony is living proof that the scriptures are true.
Yeah.
Those who are in Christ are new creations. The old is gone and the new has come.
Yeah.
And I think to hear your testimony, to hear all the stuff that you've gone through, I mean, I didn't know half that stuff. I remember when we found out about Azariah, I was like, what the heck? Danny's got a kid?
Yeah, by that time, it's kind of like my covers were getting
Yeah.
really pulled. Like everybody knew now. It's funny because like after the fact, I looked up the definition of his name, and his name literally means God's helper. And if you remember my story, like just a couple weeks before I found out about him, I had made this prayer to God. I said, God, if there's any way you could help me, like,
wow,
I don't know how I could ever stop this. And honestly, if I don't believe that if I didn't have my son, if I didn't accept that responsibility, I don't think that I would have had the desire to change ever.
Wow.
I think I would have just completely rejected the Lord for the rest of my life, probably. But having my son made me realize how just exactly like somebody that I'm supposed to love and cherish, I couldn't stand him because I had only love for myself.
Wow.
And I'm proud to say that now I love my son, and I love this kid, man. He's a little disciple. He loves Jesus. He has such a big heart. He's so smart. And man, I would have just missed out on so much joy had I not said yes to God at that moment. But
as we're ending this, what would you say to a young man that's struggling in the little things? Because I think what's interesting about your story is it started there. It started in the dabbling of pornography and the allowing your mind to wander into different places.
Yeah.
What would you say to that young man in the church? It's like, man, I want to serve God, but I'm also tempted to go down this road.
Yeah. I would say that sin is so dark and deep. It is going to ruin your life. And the only way to reject that is to keep an open window in your life. I would say to a young man that is going through similar struggles to grab hold of one individual, somebody that you can trust and be totally open to, somebody who has a spiritual life, and begin to put a window into your life. Hold no secrets. Any secret you hold can be used against you, and I think that having that principle of openness will release the shame, first of all, and it'll help just begin to uncover all the problems in your walk. It'll really expose your intimacy with the Lord. And those leaders that you can trust, they're going to lead you back to God. They're going to lead you back to a relationship with Him. So I would say, don't let shame get the best of you. Live an open life. Just live as honest and open as you can to somebody. And I think that's it. Trying to hold on to your ability to do something right is going to be a snare and a trap for you. I would say to stop looking at your own ability to do anything and look to the Lord for that. So that would be my message for someone that.
Man, love the testimony, love what God's doing. Love to see you on the other side of all this stuff. I'm glad we're still friends.
Yeah.
I never got the text though saying you're sorry. No, I'm kidding.
I'm sorry. I'm saying now.
I was like, dang, Danny offended me. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm sure. And anybody else, I wish I could have made an amends to everybody, but that was just so long. But I'm just so thankful for what God has done, and all the crazy stories that I have in the world. I just think like if I have such a crazy story from the world, I just can't even imagine what a testimony I'm going to have in my time with the Lord, and the crazy stories He's going to use me for, and the work that I get to be part of now with people's recovery, and getting to make an impact in people that were just like me, So
man, love it. Well, thanks guys for watching. See you on the next one. I hope you enjoyed that video. I know it's gonna be a blessing to your life. Listen, if you liked it, make sure you leave a like and a comment. And if you like content like this, subscribe to the channel. We release content like this every single week. And when you subscribe, turn on the notifications so that you can be notified every single time we release brand new content. Thank you again. I'll see you next time.